In 2008, while the world's banks were collapsing and trillions of dollars in wealth evaporated in a matter of weeks, one man was buying. Not selling, not hiding. Buying. He wrote checks to Goldman Sachs. He wrote checks to General Electric. While everyone else was running for the exits, he was walking through the front door of a burning building because he knew exactly what was worth saving. His name is Warren Buffett, and for 60 years he has quietly built one of the greatest fortunes in human history, not through speed, not through secrecy, but through a short list of unshakable rules about what to buy, and more importantly, what to buy first. Today, we're opening that list, and by the end, you'll understand why the richest investor alive still lives in the same house he bought in 1958, still drinks the same cherry Coke, and still makes decisions almost nobody else has the patience to make. To understand what Buffett buys first, you have to understand what he isn't. He isn't a trader. He isn't chasing headlines or hot tips or the stock everyone at the party is talking about. He built his entire philosophy on a simple, almost boring idea that a share of stock is not a lottery ticket. It's a piece of a real business, with real earnings, real customers, and a real future. And once you see the market that way, the question changes completely. It's no longer what's about to go up. It's what would I want to own, even if the stock market closed tomorrow for 10 years. That single reframe is the foundation for everything that follows, and it's about to take us somewhere most investors never think to look. The first thing Buffett buys before anything else isn't a stock at all. It's a moat. Not the kind with water and castle walls, an economic one. A structural advantage so deep that competitors can throw money at it for decades and still never break through. Coca-Cola is the textbook case. It isn't the sugar water in the bottle that made Buffett buy in 1988 and never really stop. It's the fact that you could hand a rival $10 billion and they still couldn't buy their way into the same shelf space, the same instant recognition, the same place in a billion daily rituals around the world. That's a moat. It doesn't show up neatly on a balance sheet, but it shows up in every quarter for generation after generation. Think about how many companies have tried to dethrone Coca-Cola over the decades. Think about how much money has been spent trying, and think about how, decade after decade, the same red logo is still sitting in the same refrigerators in nearly every country on Earth. That is not luck. That is a moat so wide that even Buffett's own worst decisions couldn't sink the position. But a moat alone isn't enough. A castle with no one competent guarding the gate falls just as easily as one with no walls at all. Which brings us to the second thing on the list, and it's the one that trips up almost every investor who thinks they've figured Buffett out. Buffett buys people before he buys numbers. Specifically, he buys management he trusts to act like owners, not renters. He's spoken for years about wanting to back leaders who treat shareholder money the way they treat their own. Men and women who won't gamble the company on a vanity project just to see their name in a headline. It's why he was drawn to companies like See's Candies, run by operators who understood the business down to the last chocolate box, not spreadsheet executives parachuted in to cut costs and move on. Buffett has said, in essence, that he'd rather back an outstanding manager in an average business than a mediocre one in a great business, because over enough time, character compounds just as powerfully as capital does. He has walked away from deals, profitable ones, simply because he didn't trust the people running the show. Numbers can be dressed up. A balance sheet can be polished until it shines. But a person's character shows up eventually, in every decision they make when nobody else is watching, and Buffett has built his entire fortune on refusing to bet against that truth. And once you start looking for character instead of charisma, you start noticing something else entirely, something almost invisible to the average investor scrolling a stock app on their phone. The third thing Buffett buys before anything else is simplicity. Not because he's incapable of understanding complexity. Few minds in finance are sharper, but because he's spent decades refusing to buy what he can't explain in a single sentence on the back of a napkin. He famously stayed out of the dot-com boom of the late 1990s, watched fortunes made overnight in companies with no earnings and no clear path to any, and was mocked publicly for being out of touch. Newspapers ran stories asking whether the old man from Omaha had simply lost his edge, whether he no longer understood how modern markets worked. Then the crash came. The businesses with no real revenue disappeared almost as fast as they'd arrived, and the man who didn't get it was still standing, holding railroads and insurance companies and candy shops that had been quietly making money the entire time. Simplicity, it turns out, isn't a limitation. It's a filter, one that keeps you out of the wreckage before the wreckage even happens. And that filter leads directly to the fourth rule, the one hiding in plain sight inside Buffett's own company. The fourth thing on the list is Berkshire Hathaway itself. When Buffett looks at the market and can't find a business outside his own walls trading at a price that makes sense, he turns the mirror around and buys back shares of the company he already knows better than anyone alive. It sounds almost too simple to be a strategy, but it's one of the most disciplined moves in his entire playbook, proof that sometimes the best investment in the room is the one you're already standing in if the price is right and the business is sound. Buybacks, done for the right reasons, aren't a sign of a company running out of ideas. They're a sign of a company that knows exactly what it's worth and refuses to spend shareholder money chasing something less certain just to look busy. And that same discipline, knowing what something is actually worth, not just what it's priced at, is what leads to perhaps the most surprising rule of all, the one Buffett doesn't reserve for himself, the one he's given away freely to people who will never manage a single hedge fund in their lives. The fifth thing Buffett would buy before almost anything else, for the vast majority of ordinary people, isn't a hand-picked stock at all. It's a low-cost index fund, a simple basket that owns a slice of the entire market rather than betting on any single company. He has said publicly, including in instructions of how his own estate should be handled for his family, that a low-cost fund tracking the broader market is likely to outperform most professional stock pickers over time, largely because of the fees and mistakes those professionals rack up trying to be clever. It's a strange kind of humility from one of the greatest stock pickers who ever lived, an admission that for someone without the time, the temperament, or the information edge to hunt for the next Coca-Cola, the smartest first purchase isn't a single company at all. It's ownership of the whole board, no stock picking, no late nights reading annual reports, no trying to guess which company will still be standing in 30 years. Just steady, patient ownership of the market as a whole, held for decades, left alone to compound in silence. So what do you actually do with all of this? You start by asking, before you buy anything, whether the business has a moat wide enough to survive real competition, not just a good headline. You look at who's actually running the thing, because a great business in reckless hands stops being a great business. You demand simplicity, and if you can't explain what you're buying in one clear sentence, that's the answer, not a hurdle to push through. You remember that sometimes the best opportunity is the one you already understand best, sitting right in front of you. And if none of that speaks to you, if you don't have the time or the desire to study balance sheets late into the night, you do the one thing Buffett himself has said will beat almost everyone who tries to outsmart the market. You buy a low-cost index fund and you leave it alone. None of it requires being a genius. It requires patience, discipline, and the willingness to buy what's actually good instead of what's simply loud. Buffett has never claimed to have some secret formula that nobody else could find. He's said, in different ways over different decades, that the ideas themselves are simple. What's rare is having the temperament to sit still, to say no 1,000 times so you can say yes once, and to keep saying no even when everyone around you is getting rich doing the opposite. That is the real edge, not intelligence, not access. Just the discipline to wait for the right pitch, and the patience to hold on once you've swung. If there's one habit worth starting today, it's this. Before you buy a single share of anything, ask yourself the 5 questions this film just walked you through. That filter alone will keep you out of more trouble than any tip, any app, or any headline ever will. If this kind of thinking is something you want more of, subscribe, because we're only getting started, and the next mind we take apart might change the way you look at money for good.